Hello everyone. Let's take a quick break from our project to answer one of the most common PHP questions. And that is, why do certain functions need to be echoed while other functions don't? In order to understand the answer to this, let's write a couple of functions together right now. So jump into your text editor, and within your theme folder, let's open up index.php. We're just going to write a bit of test code for educational purposes that we will delete in about 5 minutes from now. So it doesn't really matter where we type this, but I'm just going to open up a new PHP area right below the header. Okay, and now we can experiment. So type this out with me. Let's imagine we want to create our own brand new function. So function, and let's call it double me, parentheses, curly brackets. And let's imagine that the purpose of this function that we are creating is that when you call it, you give it a number, and this function will double that number and give you the result. So for example, below the function definition, when it's time for us to actually run and call the function, we might say double me 5, right? And we would expect that to generate 10. Or if we said 8, we would expect it to generate 16. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that happen within the function definition. So within these parentheses, we want a parameter that can receive the incoming number. Doesn't matter what we call it, let's just call it $x as a placeholder variable. Okay, and then in the curly brackets, in the body of the function, we could just echo out whatever number that someone passes into this function times 2, or asterisk 2. Cool. So now down below this function definition, we could say double me 4, right? And we would expect that to echo out 8 onto the page. So if we save this and refresh the home page of our website, if I zoom in a bit, there you can see the number 8. Cool. And if we change this to 25, save, we see the number 50. So that's an example of a function that we don't need to echo. We just call the function and it echoes something out onto the page for us. However, not all functions are like this. Most functions, or I should say a lot of functions, instead of echoing out their result, they return their result. So what does that mean? What does return do? It's basically a function's way of saying, my work here is done. I've done my job and now I'm returning this result, or I'm returning this value. So then down here, when we call or run the function and say double me 25, this will still equal 50. PHP will evaluate this to be 50. However, we are not doing anything with that value of 50. In this case, it's just going to sit in PHP's memory and we aren't doing anything useful with it. So if we save this and refresh, you'll notice that that value of 50 disappears up here. So now it's up to us to actually do something with the value that this function returns. Now there are a million different things we could do with the value. Probably the most obvious example would be that we could echo it out. So echo the results of double me 25. So now that will indeed show 50 again. Now functions that return values like this are really nice because they're so flexible, right? Because in the world of programming, there's a lot of things we need to do other than just echoing out simple values. So for example, we could create a variable, magical number, and tell it to equal double me 10, right? So we aren't trying to echo anything onto the page, we're just setting a variable to equal this value. Or, for another example, maybe we want to use that function as an if statement condition. So for example, we could say if double me 12 equals 24, then echo out onto the page, the function is performing the math correctly. Cool. So you get the idea. This is not a real-world example. You'd probably never do this. But the idea is that you can use the value that a function returns anywhere. Now, before we bring everything full circle and tie this back into the topic of WordPress specifically, let's have a bit of fun first. So right now, let's delete this if statement. So we've still got our double me function definition. And right now, below this, let's create another brand new function named triple me. instead of typing it out, we can just copy and paste this function. So copy, paste. Let's change the name to triple me. And then on this line, change this from ×2 to ×3. Okay, now below this, let's actually call and run these two functions together, because I think this will really illustrate the power of functions that return values. They're so flexible that they can fit together nicely. So let's begin by saying double me 5, so that would be 10, but then we can wrap that within the triple me function. So then right before that, we could say triple me, parentheses, end the parentheses here. So instead of just saying triple me 10, I'm trying to show you that you can use the value that a function returns as an argument for another function. So let's test this out by echoing it or outputting it onto the page. If you triple 10, we would expect to see 30. So save this, refresh. Cool, and if I zoom in, you can see a value of 30. Okay, now that's enough PHP for the sake of PHP. Let's tie this back into WordPress. So when it comes to the WordPress functions that we don't have to create, that we just get to leverage, it can be a bit confusing whether a function is going to echo something for us or if it's just going to return a value and so we need to echo it. So let me show you a tip that can save you tons of confusion. Back in the text editor, I will delete all of this sample code so that we can talk about WordPress functions. So for example, WordPress has a function named theTitle, but it also has a function named getTheTitle. Also, there's a WordPress function named theID, but WordPress has another function named getTheID. So how do we make sense of this? Well, there's a rule of thumb that if a WordPress function begins with the word get, that means it's not going to echo anything for you, it's just going to return a value, and it's up to you to use that value however you see fit. On the other hand, if a function begins with the word the, that means WordPress will indeed handle echoing and outputting it onto the page for you. Now at this point in the course, I say we just leave it at that. So I'm going to delete all of this test code from this lesson. So I'm putting my index.php file back to the state that it was in before this lesson even began. And moving forward, I wouldn't worry about preemptively memorizing every function and knowing exactly what it does, because that's not how people work in the real world. In the real world, you will Google in plain English terms whatever you're trying to accomplish in WordPress with code, and in the search results, you'll want to look for two main websites, Codex and developer.wordpress.org. These are the official WordPress websites, and they have a wealth of information. They will tell you exactly what a function does, how to use it, what arguments you can pass it, and most importantly, it will tell you if the function returns something or outputs something for you. Now, having said all of that, you don't need to go and do any of your own research at this point. Relax, take a deep breath, you're in this course for a reason. It's my job to gradually introduce you to more and more WordPress functions, and by the end of this course, with a little bit of repetition thrown in there for good practice, you will have a rock-solid understanding of what WordPress functions are at your disposal and what they do. I'm never a fan of preemptive memorization. I'm big on practicing, experimenting, and organically building up your understanding. So long story short, even if you didn't understand everything in this lesson 100%, I wouldn't worry about it because we're going to keep practicing these same concepts several more times. Hopefully this lesson cleared up a bit of confusion. Let's keep things rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson.